if you're watching carefully right now, look at the back cowling there, right by the prop. And I've definitely got an oil leak, and it's not minor. So you can see that I've got a major oil leak right here, and I've had a slight warning from it, and you'll see here in a second there my low oil light. I don't know if you can read it on the display there.
Tower Raptor 352 Tango Delta would like to return to the field.
And my low oil light, which comes on when my oil sump level goes anywhere just slightly below the maximum level.
Raptor 352 Tango Delta Tower, enter a left downwind runway 17, report midfield.
Left downwind for runway 17, report midfield 2 Tango Delta.
And 2 Tango Delta, wind 180 at 6, altimeter 3013.
3013, copy, 2 Tango Delta.
So that low oil light came on, and it just would flick off before if the redrive was drawing a lot of oil. But this time it wasn't going off, and I knew I had a problem, and a pretty serious problem. And then you can see here, I think you can see on there that my low oil pressure light is also on there as well. And so when I looked down and saw that, I was just like, yep, I definitely have a serious problem. So obviously I'm looking back, and there's the airport over there, and I've still got the engine running, but at this point the prop power's already back. The governor is basically stopped working. Prop's gone to flat pitch, and so I don't have a lot of power, and the aircraft is driving the prop at this point. So I'm looking over to the airport and figuring, well, I may not have an engine by the time I make it there with the oil pressure dropping off. And I was looking and knowing that the wind was coming out of the south, I could land potentially on 3.5. I could also potentially land on 3.1, although I think it's closed. I don't think they would mind. And then, I knew that there was about, 8 knots from the south. It'd probably be better just to land on 1.7 if I could make it fine. But anyway, those were decisions going through my head at that point.
Hey, I've lost the tower up to 352 Tango Delta. I'm going to declare an emergency here. I've got low oil pressure.
For 352 Tango Delta, roger, clear to land.
Clear to land, runway 172 Tango Delta. Boston Tower, Cessna 385, Mike Alpha.
Cessna 385, Mike Alpha.
10 miles west here, just off Clifton Brooks, inbound some IFO practice, please. Requesting the director to VOR, and then requesting a VOR 35 at Valdosta.
And left Boston Tower, unable emergency in progress.
November 5 Mike Alpha, unable, emergency in progress, remain outside of Valdosta Class Delta, over.
Roger, we'll stay outside the Class D for 5 Mike Alpha. 300 left turn.
Roger, insight.
Two Tango Delta has lost the engine.
November 2 Tango Delta, roger. Rescue 7, November 352 Tango Delta lost its engine. Copy, sir. Lost his engine. Rescue 7. 2 Tango Delta, turn left when able, hold short taxiway Alpha. Remain at frequency.
Copy.
Rescue 7 Bell Alpha Tower.
Rescue 7-1, go.
Rescue 7-1, proceed to the emergency aircraft.
Okay, so post-flight analysis, this is what everything looked like right when I got it back in the hangar. So you can see the oil there is coming out the seam of the cowling, the upper and lower. So basically it's been spraying on the inside of the cowling there. And then a lot of it's been leaking out the bottom here. So I still don't know at this point exactly what's caused it. I haven't pulled the cowling off yet to have a look. So that's the next thing. And this is what it was. So here's the culprit right there. That oil seal that I replaced the other day literally just slipped out, and that was a press fit. And as you can see there, it's just gone and slipped out. Now, I'm going to explain exactly what happened with that, but just to go ahead, that previous one had been in there for 100 hours of running the engine, and I replaced it because the seal was starting to wear. And so this one here now had only been in there for maybe 3 flights, and all of a sudden it decided it just wanted to pop out. So let me start by saying the words normalization of deviation, and this is purely my fault. When I had that seal in there previously, because of the tight fit in terms of the way it was designed here, you couldn't get the retaining clip to sit in there because there just wasn't enough clearance. So there's the seal there, and you see there's a retaining clip that holds it in place. Well, the seal is supposed to be 0.468 inches in thickness, and it actually ends up being thicker than that, and because of the way the design was done there, there's no extra clearance to allow that retaining ring to be inserted the way it's supposed to do. So I had left it out for ages, and as I say, normalization of deviation, I had basically said, oh, this is okay, that thing's never going to slip out of there. It was a press fit, it was really tight to get it in, and in fact when we had to replace the other one just a week or so ago, I had to destroy it to get it out. That's how tight it was. But anyway, so I basically said, oh, it's never going to come out. So anyway, putting the new one in there, I basically, tapped it into place, sort of like similar to doing a press fit, and it seemed to be as tight as what the other one was. And I was like, well, it's not going to come out there. In fact, I didn't even have the ring available that's up there in Atlanta with the rest of the stuff in storage. So I just kind of said, well, it didn't come out last time, it won't come out this time, and obviously I was wrong. So what happened was, the housing is aluminum, so that expands quicker than the carbon steel frame of that seal, and ultimately it expanded more this time, or the seal was a looser fit or something like that, and just the pressure in there was enough to have the seal just basically slide out. And then of course once that did, all the oil that was in the redrive was just being blown out of there, and then that was the beginning of the end. So I'll be putting a new seal in there, and I've also ordered a new ring, and I'm going to go to the trouble to absolutely make sure that that ring goes in there, and make sure that this problem can never happen again. But as I said, it could be a little bit difficult because the allowance in space in there is 0.468, and as you can see, that ring there is like 0.476 or something, so it's 8 thousandths oversized, so I'm going to have to just work with it to try and make sure I can get that ring in there. It has to be in there, absolutely. Alright, so another mistake that I made was over controlling the ailerons here on landing, and as you can see I banged the wing in here, and this is pilot error, but it's also exacerbated by the fact that the controls are overly sensitive because of the mechanical gearing I have it on right now, and that's something that I've already mentioned that we're going to address later on, but it's just difficult to change right now. And this is what the resultant damage looks like. You can see it's basically been scraped along the edge there. So, it's like the carbon fiber's been sanded down basically. So you've got the loose, or fairly loose fabric there. So I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to fix it yet. I might just basically trim it off and make the other side match, or I might try and reinforce it there. So I'll have to see on that one. And with respect to the engine, the turbos look fine. As you see, I've basically spun those. They seem fine. The first one is draining oil nicely through it. The second one has a little bit of a blockage in there that I'm actually slowly working to clear out with acetone, so I'll get that oil feed working fine. When the engine shut down, it still had 8 psi of oil pressure, and there was still at least a quart of oil in the sump that I drained out there, so it actually shut down at a good point. And you could probably spend hours looking at this log to figure out exactly what was going on, but for the most of it, most part of it, everything was fairly normal up to here, and this is where things started to go astray. And as you can see there, looking at the engine RPM, or the engine RPM here, this is when I initially saw the problem, and I put the power back, and then just sort of figured out what I was doing, put the power back in again, and then of course you can see the engine RPM comes up here over 4,000 at one point, and that's when I was like, oh, don't want to overspeed the prop. So I brought the power back down a little bit and just slowed the aircraft down just by sort of pitching it up a little bit more to slow it down. And then ultimately here I'm in the part where I'm just sort of cruising back to the airport, and then if we zoom in here, zoom into this section. This is right when the engine started to do that shutdown, and you can see the RPMs coming down and down and down and down and down, and then this is where it really just basically shut down completely. So there was kind of like the engine wasn't running smooth, because you can see that the RPM there was sort of fluctuating, just very minor but different than back here. And then here, this is the boost on the turbos, or the PSI in the turbos, the top one being the second one running at the higher pressure. And you can see there was a little spike here, just briefly. It went from 26 PSI up to 28. And then right after that, it just basically dropped off. And from what, we've able, me talking with different people and looking at this, from what we can figure out is the turbo basically choked the engine. So both turbos here basically just kind of lost all their boost and literally starved the engine of air, at which point it basically shut down in the space of not very long, as you saw. It just only took a couple of seconds and it basically shut down, which is actually the best way to shut down the engine if you can. So, and the fact that it still had oil pressure at the time, you can look back in here, I think it's on here, you can see oil pressure even at that point there was 5 psi before it shut down. There you can see the engine RPM there dropping off from 2,000 RPM, basically just goes down to 0, at which point it shut down. So there was still oil pressure right up to the time that it shut down, so that was good. And I think, well, we think what's happened, discussing with different people, is that potentially the oil was getting depleted going to the turbo, and so it didn't have very much oil going to it, and because it was hot in there, the little bit of oil that was going in there was starting to coke up and potentially slow the bearing down in there, just create resistance for the turbo, and then ultimately it's just sort of started robbing the engine of air, and then that kind of created a cascading event. I can't think of any other reason why this would happen other than some other reason why the turbo would shut down. But as I said, the turbo is spinning fine now, and potentially it was hot enough that it was just, tight in the housing there. And, that also contributed to having it shut down. But I'll have to see, once it all gets fired up again, obviously I'll be testing it on the ground a lot. And we'll just see if there's any problems. I've got tons of logging information here, so I can see if for some reason the turbo is not running well, or it's not producing boost or something like that. I'll know right away if there's a problem. But it seems to be fine right now. I've just got to keep flushing it with acetone and make sure that any oil that's potentially coked up in there gets cleaned out, and so it runs smoothly with the oil feed. So that's basically what's going on with the engine. I think everything else is all right. I've looked at the oil filter. It didn't look like it had a problem. There was really nothing in the oil there. I mean, I could send out for an oil sample, but, I can also just run the engine again and just see if anything is weird going on there. But because the engine shut down the way that it did, really the only thing that is potentially a problem here is the turbos. So anyway, that's pretty much all the analysis for the engine, at least for now, and at least until I get it running again. Alright, so what else can I learn from this? So I think the procedure needs to be, if something like this happens again, so in other words, if the low oil light comes on, and now that low oil light is from a float switch that's in the sump, and so if the oil in the sump gets anywhere slightly below the maximum level, and I actually already have it a little bit overfilled because it's running the redrive as well, if that oil level light comes on again, my procedure will be to immediately pull the power back, pull the nose up, slow the aircraft down to about 110, 115 knots, and while I'm doing that, bring the prop back to the flat pitch setting, so that way the governor won't be redirecting any more oil to the redrive. And that if I had done that, if I had the forethought to go and do that right when this happened, I would have basically created this or turned this into a non-event. But you can armchair this all day long after the fact when you have all the information. I didn't really know how bad the oil leak was. I didn't know where it was coming from, so had I known it was coming out of the redrive, then this is the procedure. So that's what I would do if it happened again, or something similar happened again. Low oil light on, basically, slow the aircraft down, put the prop back to flat pitch, and then just maintain power and airspeed setting in order to not overspeed the prop. And then, you just fly the aircraft around as normal, just keeping everything within those parameters, and that you're just basically operating with a fixed pitch prop at that point. So that's what I'll do if something similar happens again. So at least I have a recourse. But as I said, I'll be getting everything back together. I've got the parts and stuff ordered that are coming in this week that I need. Get it all back together, run it on the ground, a bunch. Make sure that there's nothing weird going on with the engine or the turbos or anything like that. Everything has to basically fit within the parameters of what I've been running up till now. If anything looks like it's not performing the way it was, or if there's any weird noises or anything like that, then obviously more investigation or analysis needs to be done on the engine to see if there's any other damage that came from that. So that's what it is for now. I mean, obviously there's a ton more of analysis and stuff that can come out of this, but fortunately, as far as I can tell, I don't think the engine had any major damage to it or any sort of damage to it, so we can just at least move forward. So that's this video. Thanks again for watching. Sorry it was so long, and we'll see you on the next one, and when I have some more progress on getting things back together and getting the engine running again. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.